one. This is from Trenton Art. If I'm saying Trenton Art, I think I'm saying it wrong. Now I know I always try to give like I try to showcase as many anime, manga and anime, no anime and manga recommendation type channels, but I want to do something a little different from this. We're going to pick the most worst manga that's ever been recommended. A little bit of a different twist, a little bit of fun. Um, I know that Bry might enjoy this still. I think I'm gonna enjoy this. Hopefully, this won't be a total train wreck, but this will be fun to watch and give my opinion on it if there's any opinions needed, because it is already saying the worst manga. What worse can I say, right? But it also gives shine or spotlight to other creators who are either just as high or low as I am. I'm nowhere close to high, but close enough. But
Ryaga Samurai. Nah, it's
no, it's cool.
cool.
Okay, cool. So this is from Trident Art. I'm thinking I'm saying that right. I could be saying it wrong. Came out 4 days ago. So they had this video called Shonen Jump's Worst Manga, and he has 2.35 thousand followers or subscribers. So give him a follow if you can, and also give a like to his video if you like it, or whatever the case may be. So let's see in the next one, and let's go.
Is 1 years old, I thought
Yes.
about making a video that differs from my usual stuff, which is mostly me praising or exploring weekly Shonen Jump manga. So let's talk about bad Shonen Jump manga, or ones that I don't like very much, alongside exploring the idea of what a worst manga is. Originally, I wanted to make a top 10 worst Shonen Jump manga, but I found this idea too restrictive and kind of boring, because my honest answer would have been to list some pretty miserable, boring, and unfinished works as my top 10 worst manga. While I still want to mention the majority of what would be in my top 10, I also want to touch on different kinds of worst manga because it's very easy for anyone to point to a manga they dislike from Jump and say it's the worst. It happens all the time with a lot of big series which are pretty competent, as well as recent axes, which aren't great, but I usually wouldn't ever call them the worst. It makes me laugh a bit since I guess having read so many Jump manga, when someone says something like Doron Dororon or Icehead Gill is the worst Jump manga, to me those are perfectly fine and kind of enjoyable compared to what's actually at the bottom of the barrel. And that's another point, this is mostly subjective in my opinion, but still I want this to be an exercise in thinking a bit more about why we consider a manga to be the worst. With that out of the way,
Okay.
let's address Hitman Reborn, since it's by far the most controversial take I'm going to have here, and probably the reason at least a few people clicked on this video, and maybe even commented about it without even watching. While not as well known as other big shonen contemporaries, Reborn ran for over 400 chapters, which is staggeringly long compared to the vast majority of other titles that have run in the magazine, and it's this metric, its length. This is why it's one of my worst Jump
I
manga.
said that before.
Unlike the other series on this list,
I said
Reborn
this
is
thousands of times to y'all. Y'all do everything but what I tell you. I always say, don't do any complicated, don't make it complicated than you have to, but you guys ignore that all the time, and I keep constantly saying, stop doing more than you have to. You're making the process longer. You can actually get this done within less than a year and get good at doing this. But y'all just ignore what I say and do what you please, so I don't even argue with y'all anymore. I just let you be. I keep saying it. I have the expertise on why I'm explaining this the way I do. No one ignore it. No one listens to me. I keep saying it. Don't do any when you're doing down this process. Don't be doing no extra coloring. Don't do no values. I said just do shapes, gesture, and what's the other one? Form. Those are only three. But you guys will like to add an extra layer of difficulty for like no reason, and then you guys will ask me how to draw this, and I'll explain how, and then you guys be confused, and then just either abandon the lesson or just what you was originally doing, or you try to make it look pretty by doing something that you should have done. So what I will always say to everyone, if you're learning, I don't mean to cut off the video. This is just to any student that's listening to this. Um, if you're learning how to draw, just do those three things. gesture, form, and shape. That's it. Don't add 10 different characters in one thing. Don't do no coloring. Don't do no clothing. Do a naked mannequin, because it's not hard not to see anything. There's no clothes obscuring your visualization. None of that. But nope. You guys do not listen to your teacher. And then you guys look at me like I don't know why I'm not improving. Or if you are improving, you're not improving as fast as you want to. I told you exactly what the key is, but most people don't want to listen because they want to do their own damn thing. So I leave them be. It's your money. I keep telling y'all. I'm telling you. But my goal is to get you off the subscription, not stay on it. So, you know.
Much longer and has some pedigree to it, but I don't think it comes close to matching up with most of the other long manga in the magazine. Reading it was quite frankly a chore most of the time for a few reasons. Some are out of its control, like the scan and translation quality, since it was never fully completed officially in English, but other negatives I have about Reborn are
from my experience it can be hard to not overlap personal lore and story lore too much by accident without realizing it in storyboarding.
I guess you're right in that sense. It'll be kind of hard not to. Like, let's go down to this crazy world. Okay. From my experiences, it can be hard not to overlap personal lore and story lore too much by. Yeah, it's kind of hard because remember, most stories come from your experience, right? Or a warped sense of your experience of how life goes, and that's what the old heads do. Back in the day that made movies work, or cartoons or whatever anime.
Darth Goricorn. The balance is a delicate dance on a fine line.
Yeah, and this is why most of these new writers and all these people who are using these old IPs as a vehicle because they can't think for themselves, right? So that's why people who are not truly creatives will like to jump on an IP, and just because the lore already there, right? The lore is already there, whether it be for Warhammer or Spider-Man or Dragon Ball. You know what I'm saying? It could be anything, right? The lore has already been established by someone who was already smart enough, creative enough, talented enough to construct something for everyone to love. Now it's just for the activist or the progressive or the insane person to get their hands on it when the author is dead or already sold off their property, to make the characters say things. Because remember, these are characters that you already like, right? It's easy to infiltrate a place when people already know who you are, right? So like if I can dress up like okay, it's like if I can infiltrate Disney World right now, if I can take out the dude who's wearing the mascot, right? If I take out the mascot and put on his skin suit, put on the suit itself and walk in Disney World, no one's going to suspect me of anything till I do something. Right? That's how it works. The IP is there. The mascot is there. The story behind that mascot is there. It's just now who's under the mask that makes all the difference, makes it still consistent, right? So this is why people in the old times or in the old days, like the X-Men, the 90s X-Men, the 90s He-Man, the Transformers, the G.I. Joes, all these other IPs or Ninja Turtles or whatever, were talented because they had to build off the experiences they had. Or Legend of Zelda. Like the dude who made Legend of Zelda said the reason why he made Legend of Zelda because as he was a kid, he used to explore and go in caves and stuff like that. No, nothing elaborate like in Legend of Zelda, but like, you know, he was a kid and they would explore, and that was the fun of like Legend of Zelda, to be curious, to explore, to get an outcome of something that you're not too sure of, but you will get an outcome nonetheless. That was the major point of his experience. So yeah, it's hard to not write something about your personal experience. You can do that. But the problem is when you make too much of the personal experience the forefront and not the story itself, you're going to have a problem. Stan Lee said it. The only reason why he made the X-Men is because it'll be too much of a headache to write everyone having a backstory to get superpowers. So it's much easier just to write something that was easy to create for anyone to relate to. Right, the relatability wasn't the superpowers anymore. The relatability was each character as a human from that point. but write them in such a way that they don't feel like they're pandering. They don't feel like they're just constructed because it's a superhero movie, franchise. It's that type of thing that I think is now forgotten nowadays. It's the idea of being truthful in your writing and not trying to pander in your writing or try to be relevant in your writing. I think that's stupid. I think you should write something that genuinely gets you up in arms. You know what I'm saying? That genuinely gets you want to get up out of the bed. If you write things like that, I rather the activist write about, or the progressive activist writes about their activism in a way that is original to them than taking an IP that exists and just using it as a vehicle to wag their finger at people. I'd rather you wag your finger with your original character, at least I know what to avoid, or at least I know what that's about, than you taking my beloved character like Goku or the Gojo or the Shinras of Fire Force and be wagging their finger at me because I don't believe in what they want me to believe. You know what I'm saying? That shit's stupid.
What I've done to fix the problem for me is that the stories are connected to their friends' history and not main factions, keeping the main story plot clear of confusion.
Good. That's what you want to do. Always have a separation between... You always have to have motivation. You have to have separation between motivation and was it motivation and something else I'm thinking of? It was motivational goals, but don't let distractions be the main focus. Make the goals be the main focus. Make the distractions a distraction, not the main thing. That's what a lot of people do. Now, if the backstories are relevant to the story, yeah. But if it's not to that extent, like if it's just like a basic backstory to get to point A, point B, fine. But don't make it the main source. Don't be like the Lily Sings of YouTube and telling everyone who orientation she is. She's a woman of color, and because she got here is because she's a woman of color, and there's nothing more to that. Like, you know, if you know who Lily Singh is, you know who it is. She's an annoying person. She likes to mention how funny she is. She likes to mention how of a person of color she is. She likes to mention her orientation.
Angela Robbins.
It's so annoying.
His laugh is seriously contagious. LOL.
Surprisingly, I'm fine with this initial comedy arc. It's when the battle elements get introduced it begins to struggle. A lot of the fights just lacked impact for me, feeling very cookie cutter, like they had to make a bunch of fights for each character, leading to the sidecasts feeling a bit weak and all of the arcs bloated. The heroes do get better over time and I did come to like most of them, but I very rarely cared about its villains.
Raiga Samurai. We know Brown Woman and Bai.
Yeah.
Cool, only for it to fumble a lot. New characters are introduced feeling very one note, and I don't think it really took advantage of its unique setting enough. Another big issue I have is the general sexism Reborn has. The main female cast are pitifully underutilized and are often put into babysitting or cooking roles. It left a bad taste in my mouth, and I don't really even want to touch on Chrome, but her character is all types of icky, with her relationship with one of the main antagonists being a prime source of just horrible cringe for me. She's also constantly objectified and it's not fun. Out of the big shonen manga from Jump, so far Reborn is probably my most disliked, and I generally try to lower people's expectations of it going in. As for me, I was super excited to begin it, and it seemed like it had everything going for it. A strong fan base who love it, really cool artwork, and this idea of it being a pillar of 2000s and 2010s Jump. It just ended up falling short.
Yes, I believe so. Well, I know that I think yes, because the creator said he's finishing up, I think, the Dark Continent arc, I believe. So 9 times out of 10, if he gets it done, I think they'll make an anime out of it.
That for me,
so I believe
and is
yes.
the worst in these regards, for being disappointing and for having such a big time commitment I had to do to read it all, which in the end wasn't really worth it.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Now onto a manga I can confidently say is actually really bad, and it's also
Yeah.
one of the newer ones I agree with when people bring it up as one of the worst. Our Blood Oath. As a big fan of vampires and vampire media in general, I think you usually get two kinds of vampire stories. Very good ones full of thematic depth and emotion, or absolute piles of shit like Vampire Knight, but at least Vampire Knight is oddly funny and charming. Our Blood Oath, on the other hand, is just kind of pathetic.
Have you woken, Yuki? Do you remember who I am?
This man, he's my older brother.
What? What? Whoa! Holy hell, what the hell? I never really watched Vampire. What the hell? You can't do this! Oh my god. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Vampire brothers who go around in a Monster of the Week style format. It attempts to try to interweave a narrative about family, from what I remember, but lacks coherence and is
Darth
totally all over
Goricorn.
the place with its
I've
sweeter
watched enough
aspects and
vampire
horror
movies and anime to
clashing
not
with
even be
quotable
surprised,
plot. I'm not saying
lol.
you can't have horror
That is
and
wild.
a nice
Whoa,
slice
that
of life
blew my
aspects. Our
mind.
Blood Oath just doesn't handle them very well. I remember its later character introductions coming out of left field, and it being incomprehensible at times, and for an Axe manga, it started to introduce a lot near its end, making it even messier than it already was. Pair this with some mostly mediocre art and character
Ariane.
design, as well as it taking zero
Oh, that's
advantage of
Vampire
any
Knight.
vampiric concepts or themes,
Also, did
and
you
get
get
a
the
really
reference I
dull
sent you on
mess.
Discord?
Our Blood
Let me
Oath is
see.
definitely one of the worst jump manga I've read, and the worst recent example. It's also sold very poorly, but that's to be expected with a lot of manga I'll be mentioning, with worst selling definitely being a strong reason to consider a manga to be one of the worst in Jump. Next up, we have a bit of a speed round. During the late 2000s and early 2010s, Jump serialized a lot of football manga. Sports duds littered the 2000s, but in particular this period of time had a concentrated number of football flops, which include Meister at 10 chapters, Shonen Shiku at 15, Light Wing at 22, Doi Sol at 17, and if we push our time frame later into the 2010s, we also have Tokyo Wonder Boys with 10 chapters, and Ole Golazo at 12. These are all football manga that I honestly struggled in hindsight to differentiate from each other. It doesn't help that the majority aren't fully translated or even have more than one chapter available in English, but none of them captured my attention or laid the groundwork for a fun sports series in my opinion. And it's not that I don't like sports series, since I think some of the more recent ones Jump has had are very good, and the last football manga, Shudan, was really enjoyable for me too. The truth is, if I made a top 10 worst Shonen Jump manga list, a substantial portion of it would probably be made up out of these football series, since they're lacking in anything for me. They also showcase how little time Jump will wait for sports series to blossom, and perhaps why, before 2023, we were in a bit of a drought for sports series in the magazine, because a lot of what came before it wasn't great, aside from the occasional big hits like IQ. There's definitely a case to be made that worst can also equate to something being boring or unoriginal, especially when we're talking about media, because what's the point of experiencing something you've already seen before over and over again that's also not done well? Samurai 8 is the other big name of this list that's a pretty well disliked manga, although some Kishimoto diehards can be found defending it now and again. Samurai 8 has some serious problems with info dumping and exposition. It's constantly trying to build out its world almost entirely through telling and not showing. The artwork is another thing I don't like. It's not bad in a traditional sense, but it's way too white.
What?
There's no balance of light and darks, and all the thin lines, which are meant to add detail everywhere, just make it look messy. Everything blurs together and nothing is really given space to breathe on a page. Another major gripe I have is with Hyakimaru, or more so how he's handled. A disabled character as the protagonist is a really interesting choice, and if done well it could have led to all sorts of cool narrative and emotional beats. Sadly, the manga fixes Hyakimaru at the very beginning, meaning he's no longer disabled, which is not only boring but super icky. I feel like there should have been some commitment to the idea of him being disabled, or they should have avoided the idea entirely. This is one I actually dropped way back when it came out because I just could not stomach it in every aspect. and is one I dread having to come back to because I know one day people will want to see an X-Files on it. Samurai 8 might be considered the worst for poor narrative and art choices, as well as being kind of offensive with its handling of a disabled character, or at the very least very boring in its execution. If you're familiar with the channel, you might have noticed the X-File video on SWAT, where I go way more in depth than I will here, but to put it bluntly, SWAT has one of the most dislikable protagonists ever. It doesn't know what it wants to do with its story, while simultaneously having a boring school setting, a boring sidecast, and a boring power system. It's also what an edgy 13-year-old would write if they got a chance to be in Jump. It's an all-around bottom tier Jump manga, and go check out my video on it if you'd like to hear me bash on it more. Musashi is a manga that's much older than the rest of this list, coming out in 1972 and written by Jump legend Hiroshi Motomiya. I touched on this one in one of my earlier history videos, but reading Musashi made me miserable. It's such a departure from Motomiya's first work in Otoko Ipikikaki Daisho, going from the charismatic main character of that work, Maikichi, to the titular Musashi. It's jarring. I honestly can't believe he wrote a character with so much riz for his first work to one I just hate with all my being for his second. The manga also jumps from place to place, attempting to be semi-biographical as it references the real historical figure, Musashi, but it's just messy in its execution and barely legible at times. The manga was also promptly axed during its initial run, and Motomiya continued working on Otoko Ipiki afterwards. This is the worst from a historical perspective, and an example of what I consider a good mangaka following up a great work with a really bad one that lacks all the charm from their initial success. If you've been in the wider Jump community for any amount of time, chances are you might have heard the name Chagecha pop up. It's, from my knowledge, the quickest manga to have ever been axed in the modern history of the magazine, lasting a pitiful 8 chapters. It's created by the author of Bobobo, Yoshio Sawai, and uses the same humor and crude drawings, but this time mixes in gang and Yankee elements. For whatever reason, it must have been pretty hated to be culled this quickly, and from reading it myself, it's just a mess both visually and in its narrative, and overall I'd say it's a very repulsive manga. Nevertheless, it will be remembered in Jump history as being one of the worst and shortest manga to ever be serialized within the magazine. Another personal stinker of mine is Sporting Salt, a manga about a boy who wants to be a doctor for athletes specifically, the premise sounding kind of original. I remember the majority of what is translated focusing on what wacky gadgets the main character could make to help out other athletes. It just doesn't seem like a good concept for a long-running series though. Its characters are also one-note, and it has some of the blandest art I've seen in Shonen Jump. Art's quite hard to dissect and critique overall, but I can quite confidently point to its constant bland pure white backgrounds, blank-faced characters, and general poor quality drawings as an example of a badly made manga. And generally, even if a manga is bad, the art is still nice and unique, but with Sporting Salt and a lot of manga on this list, the art is more of a detractor than anything. This is an example of a manga so bland in every aspect, in its characters, story and art, and concept even, that it can't be anything but one of the worst. And finally, we reach the boy taking front and center in the thumbnail, Inumaru from Inumaru Dashi. This is a gag manga from 2008 focusing on a nursery school age boy called Inumaru and his caretaker Tamako. The first thing you'll notice is that this has one of the most ugly and poorly drawn art styles you've ever probably seen from Jump, and that Inumaru's junk is constantly hanging out, which is meant to be funny I guess, and is one of his central gags, so I hope you get used to it if you plan to read this manga.
No.
If that's not enough to deter you, Inumaru is maybe the most annoying little shit to ever exist. I'm not sure if he's purposely meant to make you angry, but the poor adults who have to take care of him are terrorized by him and his stupid penis jokes and asinine references the whole manga. I remember not really getting any references, maybe because of regional differences or airport translation, but it's not funny in the slightest. From every single thing I've read in Jump, this little fuck is my most hated manga character and belongs in the worst manga in Jump. It also somehow lasted 4 years, I cannot imagine reading this for 4 years. I get that gag manga are subjective and comedy is subjective, but Roboco, Chojo, Kochikame, heck, I even like Ichigoki, they're all way better than this, and I'd even gladly read the gag manga I dislike over this. Things like Shigomaru or Mori King, they're still way better than what Inumaro Dashi is. So if you take something out of this video, I think it should be that before you complain or call something the worst manga in Jump, know there is a Lovecraftian depth to the bad manga within the magazine. There's manga I wouldn't even wish my worst enemy read. So hey, you might not like Jujutsu Kaisen or Kagurabachi or some other axe manga, but at least it isn't fucking Inumaro Dashi.
If I ever find one of these lying around again, I swear to fucking God, I will stop being so polite. Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
And those are what I think are some of the worst manga Shonen Jump has to offer. Of course, there's a lot more duds out there, and there's tons of manga I've still yet to read or flat out can't because they lack translations, but from the 200 plus manga from Jump I've read, these definitely stand out in one way or another as one of the worst. If you disagree and do like any of these series, please feel free to tell me what you like about them in the comments, or tell me what your least like Jump manga is. Hopefully no wars start down there. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to hear me talk more positively about manga, I have a whole host of videos on Weekly Shonen Jump on my channel, ranging from my history series, where I go over old manga from Jump's history, to the Axe Files series, where I cover some of the less fortunate cancelled manga from Shonen Jump.
Okay, that's the end of that. So with that said, like, subscribe, share, follow, and comment. This was Trenton Art. I don't know, man. That one, those last other ones, the Vampire Knight and the other one threw me off completely. That threw me off. Oh god, the kid, that one, if that was supposed to be a kid, I don't know. Like, that was just uncalled for, to be honest. It is what it is. So we're done here pretty much. Let me answer Ari's question before I go. So it's